This game was meaningless, but the Bucs take their biggest loss of the season and probably their biggest loss since 2021. That and more on today's episode of Locked On Bucs.
You are Locked On Buccaneers, your daily Tampa Bay Buccaneers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, and welcome into this live post-game reaction episode of Locked On Bucs, your daily podcast covering the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I want to thank you for making Locked On Bucs your first listener view every day. Don't forget you can subscribe or follow for free on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. And of course, you can follow along on Twitter. I am James Yarcho at JYarcho_Bucs, credentialed member of the media covering your Tampa Bay Buccaneers as editor-in-chief of the 813.tv. Here with you every Monday through Friday along with the everydayers. And for that, I want to share my appreciation for your continued support of the show. One of the ways you can support the show is become a Locked On Bucs insider. You're going to get news, rumors, updates, general thoughts, one-on-one conversations with me via text message, no ads or anything like that. Go to joinsubtext.com/LockedOnBucs or click the link in the show notes to become an insider today. This episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. I was setting this show up to be like all the other post-game shows. Biggest moment, biggest takeaways, whether it was game balls or, something else at the end, depending on how the game went. That's how this show was going to go. Throughout the game, I knew we weren't giving away game balls. The Buccaneers ended up getting absolutely shellacked. They lose 41-31. The score was a lot closer than the game was. And I'm sitting there working on my biggest moment, talking about when Mike Evans went down with injury. But the biggest moment was when Chris Godwin went down with an injury. And so I scrapped my entire script. I had bullet points, I had stats, I had everything ready to roll. And then Chris Godwin, with under a minute left, goes down, gets carted off in an air cast. Todd Bowles, after the game, said that it looks like a dislocated ankle. That's not officially official yet, but that means Chris Godwin is out for the rest of the season. That is the biggest moment, not just in this game, but that is the biggest moment for this Buccaneers season. Chris Godwin was having a career year, leading the league in receiving, led the league in receptions, was leading the league in yards, was leading the league in yards after catch, was leading the league in touchdown reception. Well, I guess he fell one behind Mike Evans when Evans scored that opening touchdown, had one taken away from him on a bad holding call. But this changes everything. This changes absolutely everything for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. We talked about it last week. I talked about it on the live preview show on Monday, that if the Bucs were going to lose this game, because in the grand scheme of things, it doesn't matter. It's more important to beat Atlanta. How are the Bucs going to beat Atlanta without Mike Evans and Chris Godwin? Like, I'm at a loss for words because I am so unbelievably just sick to my stomach over what happened to Chris Godwin. Chris is one of the best, not just players in the NFL, but he is one of the best people. And watching the way he was playing this year, it should have brought a smile to everybody's face. I don't care what team you're a fan of. Ross Jackson, the host of Locked On Saints, he and I talk all the time about how much he likes Chris Godwin. So the way Godwin's season was going in a contract year, to end like that is gut-wrenching. And what does that do to Baker Mayfield? I was just on the Blitz with Evan on 10 Tampa Bay on Sunday talking about how Baker Mayfield is an MVP candidate. And he's an MVP candidate because of how well Mike Evans is playing and how unbelievable Chris Godwin has been. He's not going to be an MVP of the – I mean, this game probably took him out of the running, but there was still a lot of time left. Lamar Jackson was unreal. 5 touchdowns. He had as many touchdown passes as he did incomplete passes. But if this offense doesn't have Chris Godwin, This offense is a shell of itself. We saw it become a shell of itself when Mike Evans went down. That's when Baker started forcing bad passes. That's when he threw interceptions. Mike Evans changes everything for this offense. Now, Chris Godwin is out. I don't know what they're going to do, guys. I really don't know what they're going to do. And I hope when I can come back on tomorrow's episode with a clear head, I can give you some answers. But right now, in the emotion of coming out of that game, and honestly, I'm sitting there watching it, and I know Bucs fans are upset, and I was frustrated at some points, but I didn't care that they were going to lose. I really, truly didn't. And it was for all the reasons that I told you guys all week. It's for all the reasons that I said on Inside the 813 with Rock Riley last week. I had it written down over here on one of my several pads of papers with Mike Evans on the field. Baker Mayfield, 38 touchdown passes, 11 interceptions. Without Mike Evans on the field, 6 touchdown passes, 6 interceptions. I think that number is now 8 touchdown passes and 6 interceptions. Maybe it's 7 interceptions. I can't remember now. I had it all written down. That's how impactful Mike Evans is to the offense. But Chris Godwin was the engine that drove this car. He was the anchor. He was the guy that no matter what, no matter the down and distance, no matter where they were on the field, you looked for 14 because he was going to make a play. It was just a couple weeks ago that the Bucs had a 3rd and 20 plus, and Chris Godwin gets a first down on a screen pass. The leadership, the personality, everything about him in the locker room and on the field, the rest of the offense fed off of that. This was probably the most catastrophic injury that the Buccaneers could have faced this season. You can talk about Baker Mayfield, and I completely understand that. But in terms of the Buccaneers' ability to compete, their ability to win the division, their ability to make a playoff run, losing Chris Godwin crushes it. It absolutely crushes it because this offense is not the same without him. That's why he was so important. That's why I was going to be spending 2 months after the season pounding the table and finding ways to give Chris Godwin the money that he was earning. That could be the last game we ever see Chris Godwin wearing pewter and red. I hope it's not. And I know Jason Light hopes that it's not. And he and John Spytek are going to work round the clock to try to figure out how to keep him there. Baker wants him there. We know Liam Cohen wants him there. Everybody wants him there. But the NFL is a business. And at the end of the day, Chris Godwin could look to move on. Mike Evans chose not to. That doesn't mean that Godwin will. That injury ripped the hearts out of Buccaneers fans that were already upset about the way their team played in primetime yet again against the Baltimore Ravens yet again. And you want to talk about pouring salt in the wounds? That was a dump truck of salt that just got poured all over Raymond James Stadium. Going to jump into the live chat real quick before we hit the break. I just saw it. Where'd you go? Somebody said something to the effect of Jalen. Oh, here it is. Bo LaFrenchie says Jalen better step up. Jalen McMillan had a good game. And that was one of the things that I was actually going to talk about. After his one target turned into a deflected pass that was intercepted last week, Jalen McMillan had a clutch 4th down pickup. He had a clutch 3rd down pickup. McMillan overall played really well. He's about to become a much bigger part of the offense. I talked, for those of you that were watching during draft season, I was talking about The Buccaneers need to draft a receiver, and they need to draft a guy that could be a potential Chris Godwin replacement if they move on. Now, Jalen McMillan, I'm not saying that he's Chris Godwin because he's not. But, it's nice to see him trending in the right direction because he's about to become a focal point of this offense, especially if that hamstring injury that Mike Evans suffered keeps him out against Atlanta, and I think it will. If you go into a game against Atlanta without Mike Evans, without Chris Godwin, ooh, buddy, you better really, really hope that they can figure out something. Destined for Greatness says, I think our defense needs help. I don't know what it is, but we are missing something. I can tell you exactly what we're missing. I'm going to talk about it coming up after the break. And it's a guy that I was, in favor of. Now, not so much. And boy, another bad game for him. I'm going to tell you who that is coming up in just a little bit. That is next on today's episode of Locked On Bucs, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Hey, NFL fans, you can start this season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. This soon after the Buccaneers lost to the Ravens, there is no line yet for their game against the Falcons or any odds for the NFC South as of this moment. But you have to imagine that those injuries to Evans and Godwin are going to play a big role in what those lines move to. The Bucs came into Monday night at plus 175 to win the NFC South, and I cannot imagine that they're going to be close to that after those devastating injuries. You are going to get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get those $200 in bonus bets when you place your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. When you're hiring for your small business, you want to find quality professionals that are right for the role. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs has the tools to help you find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. LinkedIn isn't just a job board. LinkedIn helps you hire professionals that you can't find anywhere else, even those who aren't actively searching for a new job, but might be open to the perfect role. In a given month, over 70% of LinkedIn users do not visit other leading job sites. So if you're not looking on LinkedIn, you're looking in the wrong place. On LinkedIn, 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. So hire professionals like a professional on LinkedIn. I wonder if there are any wide receivers looking for jobs on LinkedIn. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedonnfl. That's linkedin.com/lockedonnfl to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. Thank you again for making Locked On Bucs your first listener view every day. I'm not going to keep you waiting. Destined for Greatness, you said that you think that the defense needs help and you don't know what it is, but they're missing something. And then, yes, you are so smart. Destined for Greatness in the chat says, James, let me guess, it's KJ Britt. Yes, it is KJ Britt. Another bad performance from him. Tight ends, wide open over the middle of the field. Mark Andrews finishes with 2 touchdowns in this one. And to add injury to injury to injury to insult, KJ Britt was the one that hit Tyke Smith and knocked him out of the game with a concussion. An already thin secondary with Jamel Dean on injured reserve. Tyreek Funderburk had a good game. Christian Izien was back, but Tyke Smith was a stud last week against the New Orleans Saints. He was having another decent game, gets knocked out with a concussion. And look, I like KJ Britt. I do. I was in his corner last season when he was filling in for Devin White. I was in his corner all offseason, talking about how he had earned this opportunity to be a starter. It is glaringly obvious that he is a detriment to the defense. He also had a roughing the passer penalty where he hit Lamar in the head with the crown of his helmet. These mistakes are rookie mistakes. These are things that should not be happening for someone who has been in the league as long as KJ Britt has. I don't care how long he's been a starter. These are stupid rookie mistakes being made by a player that did all he could to earn a starting job last year, and now he's throwing it away. He's bad in run defense. He's bad in pass defense. He's bad at getting after the quarterback. You know, I want him to succeed. It's just not happening. And every single week, we look at a pivotal play, a pivotal conversion, a pivotal touchdown by the opponent and go, there's KJ again. It's too many at this point. And I realize that the Bucs are between a rock and a hard place because KJ Britt is not playing well, but they don't have Servassier Dennis to turn to. They don't have a guy that they can pivot to at this stage. So that's what they're missing. They're missing an off-ball linebacker that can actually complement Lavonte David. For all of Devin White's shortcomings, for as bad as he was in coverage at times, for some boneheaded mistakes that he made, for the ego that he carried with him, it was at least he had the splash plays. At least he could get after the quarterback, or he would force a fumble, or he would get an interception. There was at least a trade-off somewhere. There hasn't been a trade-off with KJ Britt. It's just been bad play after bad play. And the Bucs aren't going to survive with that happening in the middle of their defense. They're just not. There's only so much that Lavonte can do. There's only so much that Antoine Winfield Jr. can do. No matter what the opposing offense is doing, KJ Britt is a liability. I hope he gets it figured out. I like him. I wanted him to do well. I was rooting hard for him this year. Because it was like, man, you finally got your shot. You made the most of it. The Bucs are moving on from Devin. They're moving forward with you as the starter. Bro, letting it slip. We got Tones Mac in the chat. He says, this was not a bad loss. We will be good. Stop crying. Doubt my words. We will be awesome. No worries. Devoted fans like me never give up on our Bucs. We will be awesome. I mean, Tones, I'm here to be realistic. And the realism of the situation is that without Mike Evans and without Chris Godwin this week against Atlanta, it's going to be real tough to beat that team. Without Chris Godwin for the rest of the season, it's going to be real hard for them to be awesome. This wasn't a bad loss in terms of the fact that they lost. It's a bad loss in terms of the fact that they lost their two biggest playmakers on the team. Not on the offense, on the team. You all know my love for Lavonte and Vita and Antoine. Zion McCollum with another incredible play in this one. Literally dragged a pile of Ravens to the end zone, and then it was called back. But he got the takeaway. But Chris Godwin and Mike Evans are the biggest playmakers on this team, and they're gone. That's the situation. The Bucs will get Evans back. Chris isn't going to be back this year. I hope I'm wrong. Tones, I hope you come back in the chat and say, I told you Godwin was going to be back. I would be thrilled. But that is the situation. And Tones, I see you in the chat. I know the talent. But that talent isn't Mike Evans and Chris Godwin. Jalen McMillan is not Mike Evans. Trey Palmer is not Chris Godwin. Sterling Shepard is not Chris Godwin. I know as a fan, you don't want to hear these things, but I'm going to be honest. I've always been honest with you guys on this show. Always. One of the things that I had written down for my biggest takeaway on the offense was that Rashad is still a weapon and this team can run the ball. I was super hyped at the way they were running the ball early. The Ravens were allowing 59 rushing yards per game this season. The Bucs were past that in the beginning of the second quarter. They rushed for 113 yards the last time I checked. It was over 100 yards as a team, finished with 125. Rachaad White, the second leading receiver on the team in this one, 71 yards on 6 receptions with 2 touchdowns. This three-headed monster thing is working. Sean Tucker looked great. He was averaging almost 6 yards a carry. Bucky Irving, he was fighting for tough yards, got into the end zone. Rachaad White, absolute dynamite in the passing game. They're going to have to lean on him. They're going to have to lean on him moving forward because of the loss at receiver. Jalen McMillan, I think, is going to turn into a good NFL receiver. But right now, he's up and down. Cade Otton's going to have to get used a lot. Trey Palmer, he's all right. Sterling Shepard, he can be good as long as he keeps his head on straight, which he didn't do against the Saints. But those guys are now pivotal parts of this offense. Cameron Johnson went to injured reserve. He's not coming back for at least 3 more weeks. Raheem Jarrett, eligible to come off of injured reserve, but he hasn't yet. This team has no receivers right now. That's the reality. And I know you're upset, about me saying this, but those are the facts. Donald in the chat says, James, do we go for a Mike Williams via trade now, like you were saying, all preseason? Do we make a move like this to help? I am going to talk about some potential possibilities tomorrow because I've already started thinking about it. Mike Williams is certainly one of them. There's another one that I think could help the Bucs quite a bit. You may say, I don't know, it's a little too much money. I don't know, he's over the hill, but DeAndre Hopkins getting away from Will Levis and getting into this offense with Liam Cohen could work. I'm going to dive more into that tomorrow, but coming up on the other side of this, I have words for Todd Bowles. That is coming up next on today's episode of Locked On Bucs. You all know how much I love going to live events, concerts, sporting events. I'm constantly talking on this show about a concert or a game I'm getting ready to go see. And the first place that I'm checking out when I look for tickets is Game Time. In fact, I just used Game Time to get my dad an early birthday surprise. So we are going to head off to Champaign, Illinois to see the Fighting Illini take on the University of Minnesota here in a little under 2 weeks. Game Time has a new feature called Game Time Picks that makes getting tickets for your favorite live events even easier. Game Time Picks filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. And then I flip on that little toggle with the all-in pricing so I have no surprises when I get to checkout. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game time. Whether you're dodging tackles on the field or cheering from your couch, The Joint Chiropractic has your back, literally. As an official chiropractor of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, they're here to make sure you're always in the game, no matter your role. If you're feeling the pain after a long week or just looking to stay active, they offer personalized care to help you bounce back stronger. 90% of elite athletes, including NFL pros, rely on chiropractic care to stay at the top of their game and perform their best. At The Joint, you don't need an appointment. Just walk in and get the care you need same day. No scheduling hassles. Just walk in when it's convenient for you. Here's the real kicker. As a Bucs fan, you can get your first visit for just $19. Head over to Buccaneers.com, check out the contest and promotion section under the Fans tab, and download the offer. A great deal for great fans. Head to thejoint.com to find your nearest Tampa area location. Wrapping things up here on a very somber episode of Locked On Bucs, talking about the Buccaneers' 41-31 loss to the Baltimore Ravens, but more importantly, the losses of Mike Evans and Chris Godwin. Even more notably, the fact that they lost Godwin in a game that was already over with less than a minute left, and the impact that's going to have moving forward. And here's the thing. I saw the clip of Todd Bowles talking to the media about why Chris Godwin was still in the game. And he was talking about how these guys are competitors and they wanted to fight and they still had a chance. They, if they had scored a quick touchdown and then recovered the onside kick, which, by the way, I realize it was all over social media that there was like a limit of 2 onside kicks. No, there's no limit on onside kicks if you are trailing and it's in the fourth quarter. The Bucs could have scored, recovered an onside, scored, recovered an onside, scored again. It doesn't matter. There's no limit on them. So wanted to clear that up because that was like all over the place. But Todd Bowles was talking about why these guys were still in the game. And, Scott Reynolds had said, is it your job to protect those players? Even when they're competitors and they want to be on the field, is it your job to tell them it's over, let it go? And Todd got really defensive and said, I do protect my players. And it was a very, very odd and awkward exchange. And here's my thing. Todd Bowles knows more about football than, anybody involved in this live stream right now. He's forgotten more about football than any of us will ever know. As a head coach, sometimes it's better to move on. And I don't mean like quit and move on. What I mean is move on from this game. We talk about it with quarterbacks who take a sack instead of forcing a bad pass. You live to play another down. The Bucs were going to live to play another game, a far more important game. And with under a minute left, down by 10, you have your starters still on the field. Chris Godwin suffers a catastrophic injury, and you lose him for the rest of the year. The team rallies around. Guys are kneeling, guys are praying, guys are going up to Chris, who's on a cart in an air cast. And then you leave your starters on the field some more. Todd, I love you, but what in the actual hell? You just saw a vital member of your team take an unnecessary injury to end his season, and you're still putting Baker out there. You're still putting Rashad out there. You're still putting vital pieces of this team back out on the field. You weren't going to win. It was over. Godwin had no business being on the field at that point in time anyway. It's literally your job as head coach to make tough decisions. The decision in that situation, regardless of the competitive fire in Chris Godwin, in Baker Mayfield, is to look at them and say, we already lost Mike. We can't lose the two of you. We have Atlanta this week. And if we lose that game, we're not winning the division. We lose that game, Atlanta is going undefeated in the NFC South, and at best, we're 4-2. I can't lose you guys. I'm sorry. We're going to chalk this one up, and we're on to Atlanta. Instead, you let them go out there, and that's the crap that happens. I have not been this furious with a decision that Todd Bowles has made since that game against the Texans when they completely just fell apart. And I was furious with him for a myriad of reasons. But this singular decision, not saying, no, I'm the head coach, you guys need to sit this one out. We're going to send Kyle out there. We're going to send, Tucker out there. We're sending our backups in. Let it go. You not only potentially Hindenburged the Bucs season with Chris Godwin getting hurt, but then you sent them back on the field. At some point, you have to say no. The Bucs had no shot at winning at that point in time. Why was it important for those guys to be out there? Why didn't you make the executive decision to tell them, I respect the fire, I respect your will to win, but you need to respect the fact that we still have 10 games left after tonight? That was an inexcusable, unbelievable mistake by Todd Bowles. You can get mad at his time management. You can get mad at his scheme. You can get mad at those things. Long term, okay, it doesn't matter. You had a bad scheme against Atlanta, you lost, whoop-de-doo. Bad performance tonight, you lost, whoop-de-doo. But you might have just destroyed the Bucs' chances of making the playoffs. You already lost Mike Evans in this game. Why are you still trying to score points in a decided game and then have that happen? And I realize there's a flip side to this argument. I realize that if they had scored a quick touchdown, if Godwin doesn't get tackled by Roquan Smith there and dislocates his ankle, and he takes it to the house, there's the possibility of a miracle that they recover another onside kick. The likelihood, it's more likely you're going to have one of those 11 players go down with an injury on a meaningless play than it is that you're going to score 10 points in 47 seconds. That was unforgivable. Absolutely unforgivable decision by Todd Bowles. There's no excuse for it. And again, I'm sick over what happened and in the season that could have been for Chris Godwin. But even more so, I'm just heartbroken for him. I really am. This guy finally was back to being himself after that ACL tear. He was finally the Chris Godwin that we knew that he could be, that he was up until the ACL tear. Now he's got to do it all over again. The amount of money that man just lost because of that injury, it's unreal. I'm going to talk more about potential Band-Aids. I don't want to call them solutions. They're not solutions. Nobody's replacing Chris Godwin, but I will talk about potential Band-Aids coming up on tomorrow's episode, but that is going to do it for this one. Thank you all for staying up late with me in this live chat. You guys are the best. And I know there was a ton of comments and I didn't get to all of them, but I really, truly do appreciate it. Please make sure that you're subscribed on YouTube with those notifications turned on so you know every time a new episode drops, every time I go live. Subscribe to the show on your favorite podcast platform. If you would be so kind, hit the like button on YouTube, leave a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. It helps other Buccaneers fans find the show. Make sure you're following on Twitter at Locked On Bucs, at @Yarcho_Bucs. Check out everything going on over at the 813.tv and become a Locked On Bucs insider. Go to joinsubtext.com/LockedOnBucs or click the link in the show notes. Hope you all have an absolutely outstanding day. Stay safe, stay healthy, fire the cannons. Want to thank you so much for joining me right here on Locked On Bucs, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.